I stood there, my hand still hovering over the broken cane, the shards of wood mocking me on the floor. The laughter of my daughter-in-law echoed in the background, too sharp, too pleased. My son, sitting across the table, didn't even flinch. He just kept eating, ignoring the destruction in front of him. After all these years, I had given him everything, and he still chose her. I wasn't just a stranger in my own home. I was invisible. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The sound didn't echo like it should have. It cracked once, short, brutal, like a bone snapping, and then the room went dead still. Elaine's fingers froze inches from the cane leaning against the dining chair. She blinked once, twice, as if she'd imagined the sight in front of her. But there Megan stood, smirking, her French manicured nails still curled around the two broken halves of Elaine's cherrywood cane. I guess it wasn't as strong as it looked, Megan said, tossing one half to the floor like trash. Elaine straightened her back a fraction, feeling every one of her 73 years in her spine. Her joints ached, the floor swayed beneath her slightly, but her gaze never left Megan's. Across the table, David's fork scraped against his plate, then silence. He didn't look up, just kept cutting into his roast like nothing happened. Megan, he said weakly, not even raising his voice. That wasn't necessary. Megan laughed, sharp, hollow. Oh please, it was a stick. She's lucky we let her stay here. The words landed like ash in Elaine's chest. She didn't move. She wouldn't give them the show they wanted, some fragile old woman crumbling at the table. No. She pressed her palm to the edge of the table, steadying herself as she stood. Her hip protested. Her right knee trembled, but she didn't fall. I'll get another, Elaine said, voice even, eyes like cold slate. Better one this time. Megan raised an eyebrow. You can afford one? She sneered. With your limited income and all. Elaine didn't answer. Her eyes flicked to David, who still hadn't looked up. She might have forgiven the silence once, might have swallowed it for the sake of keeping peace, but not tonight. Not after this. Instead, she turned away, walking slowly toward the hallway, one hand trailing the wall, the other clenched at her side. The broken cane lay behind her like the remains of something sacred. In the living room, the scent of pot roast clung to the air, too rich and suddenly nauseating. The sound of plates clinking returned faintly behind her. Laughter, Megan's, not even masked. Elaine's stomach twisted. She reached her room and shut the door quietly, her breath shallow, controlled. In the dim light she looked down at her trembling hands, then slowly, deliberately blippins. She sat at her vanity chair, picked up her compact mirror, and dabbed beneath her eyes. No tears, not one. The phone beside her buzzed. Carolyn. She let it ring, then picked it up. Did something happen? Carolyn asked, as if she already knew. Her voice was raspy, fierce like gravel wrapped in silk. Elaine hesitated. She snapped my cane. Silence. She what? Elaine closed her eyes, right in front of me, over her knee. Jesus, Elaine, she smiled while doing it. Elaine added. David said nothing, not even a real protest. A breath on the line. Then Carolyn's voice, colder now. Don't let them belittle you. I didn't say a word, Elaine said, almost surprised at herself. Good. That was the smart move. Elaine let the silence settle. Outside her door, she heard Megan's heels clicking on the hardwood, the fake cheer in her voice, as she called David to help with the dishes. As if nothing had happened, as if a woman's dignity could be shattered and swept aside with the crumbs. You still have Martin's number? Carolyn asked. Elaine nodded slowly. I do. Call him tomorrow. You need a new cane. Yes, but more than that, you need a new plan. Elaine looked at her reflection. 73. Wrinkles, sure. Slower bones. But her eyes looked the same as they did when she took over the family business in '88. The same steel. I'll handle it, Elaine said. Damn right you will, Carolyn replied and hung up. Elaine set the phone down gently. Then she stood, careful and deliberate, made her way back down the hallway to the dining room. Megan sat curled on the couch, now glass of wine in hand. She barely looked up. Elaine walked past the broken cane, didn't flinch. At the threshold to the kitchen, David finally raised his eyes. His mouth opened, then closed again. Elaine didn't bother stopping. She simply turned back to Megan, her voice quiet, but slicing through the room like a blade. "This isn't over." Megan scoffed. "Oh, what are you going to do?" Elaine didn't answer. She just smiled, slow, knowing, and kept walking. The floor felt uneven under her bare feet, warped wood and cold air colliding as Elaine braced a hand against the wall. Behind her, the broken cane still lay by the chair like a corpse, no one dared touch. Megan's laughter had faded, but its aftertaste clung to the room like cheap perfume and scorn. Elaine didn't glance back. With slow, deliberate steps, she walked. Her palm skimmed the wallpaper's faint texture, floral ridges like brittle ivy. Her gait was steady, but every step demanded a quiet rebellion from her joints. One misstep, and Megan would hear the stumble. That was unacceptable. She wouldn't give them that sound. "Mom?" David's voice reached her halfway down the hall, weak and wobbling. She didn't mean it. Elaine stopped, turned her head slightly. She didn't face him fully. He didn't deserve it. Her lips parted, then closed. There was nothing worth saying. She kept walking. In her bedroom, she shut the door without a slam. Dignity had its own volume. She turned the lock, not out of fear, but to stake the boundary they never respected. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the floral bedspread. There were creases in the cotton from when she'd folded it that morning, each one perfect. Her life, once ruled by order, now unraveled in subtle humiliations. But this was the line crossed. The cane had been a gift from her late husband, Tom. He'd carved the initials into the handle himself the summer after her hip surgery. "In case I'm not around to catch you," he'd said. Now it lay in splinters on the hardwood floor, shattered by a woman who saw kindness as weakness. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the phone on the nightstand. It rang once. "Elaine," Carolyn's voice snapped to life, warm and worried. "She did it," Elaine said softly. Snapped it in half like she was breaking a pencil. A sharp inhale. "She what?" "I didn't fall," Elaine said. "Damn right you didn't." Carolyn's voice was a hammer wrapped in velvet. "But that's not the point." Elaine pulled the blanket over her lap. "David just watched, like it wasn't even a thing. He's been watching and doing nothing for years. You just finally stopped pretending it doesn't matter." The silence between them thickened with something electric. "I walked out," Elaine said. Slow, but straight. Carolyn let out a low hum. "You need two things, hon. A new cane, and a new plan." Elaine allowed herself a small smile. I was thinking the same." Carolyn continued. "You remember Martin Blake? Your estate guy." "Of course." "Good. Call him tomorrow. I don't care if it's 9 a.m. sharp, pick up the phone." Elaine exhaled, letting the thought sink in. Martin had handled Tom's affairs with unshakable precision. The man didn't just draft documents, he wielded the law like a scalpel. She hadn't needed him in years. But now? "I will," Elaine said. "I will." She hung up and set the phone down slowly. Outside her door, footsteps passed. Megan's voice filtered through, something smug and sugar-coated, speaking to David in that syrupy tone she only used when she was angling for control. Elaine rose to her feet, ignoring the flare in her hip. She walked to the window and parted the curtain, just enough to look out into the quiet Denver night. The neighbor's porch light flickered. A distant dog barked. Somewhere, behind all of that, the future stirred, quiet but not still. The wind swept past the glass, whispering through the trees like a promise. She didn't know the next step yet. Not exactly, but she'd walked out of that room, on her own, without breaking, and tomorrow she'd make the call that would change everything. Elaine tightened her grip on the manila folder in her lap as the elevator creaked to a stop on the 11th floor. Her fingers traced the edge of the flap, feeling the faint vibration in her knuckles. equal parts age and fury. The doors opened to a quiet hallway, carpeted in gray, smelling faintly of wood polish and legal confidence. Martin Blake's name glinted in bronze across the frosted glass door. She stepped in, shoulders square. The receptionist greeted her with a warm, "Miss Foster. He's expecting you," and led her into the inner office, where soft jazz played beneath the steady hum of a desk lamp. Martin stood the moment she entered. Same calm gray suit, same even eyes, just a little more silver at the temples than last time. "Elaine," he said, offering his hand. "You look resolute." "Close enough," she said, sitting across from him. Her cane, what was left of it, wasn't with her. She didn't need it for this part. This moment belonged to paper, not wood. She slid the folder across the desk. "I wrote it all down. Every detail." Last night, Martin opened the folder and adjusted his glasses. His brows furrowed as he scanned the first page. Elaine sat back, eyes locked on his reaction, not the pages. She didn't wince as he read the sentence. "She snapped my cane over her knee during dinner." He reached the end and closed the folder with a slow exhale. "I assume this wasn't the first disrespect, just the loudest." Elaine nodded once. Martin folded his hands. "And you're ready to move forward." "I'm ready to stop pretending that silence is noble," she said. "They don't deserve what Tom and I built." He leaned forward slightly, voice quieter. "Then the first thing we do is update your will. Immediately." Elaine didn't hesitate. "Good." Martin opened a drawer and pulled out a slim stack of documents. "I kept the old one on file. We'll keep the structure. You've still got a strong portfolio, liquid accounts, and of course the house. But now we change the beneficiaries. Remove David and Megan entirely," she said. Martin paused, pen in hand. "Are you sure you want to remove David too?" Elaine's face didn't flinch. He stood there and watched her break it, watched her break me. Martin nodded slowly, then wrote. For the next 20 minutes, the office filled with the quiet scratch of pen against paper, the whisper of pages being turned, the occasional sharp click as Martin marked a line for initialing. Elaine read every sentence. She signed with careful intent. Not anger, something older, something quieter, justice that had waited too long. When it was done, Martin slid the documents into a locked drawer. "That's the preliminary change. I'll draft the final notarized version this week, but legally it's already in effect." Elaine leaned back in the chair, a breath slipping out of her chest. Not relief, exactly, but the start of something cleaner. "You're not just cutting them out," Martin said. "You're taking control." "I know." He smiled faintly. "And if they find out?" "I'm counting on it," she said. She stood to leave. As she stepped into the hallway, her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her purse and froze. "Megan." The text was short. Too short. "You owe me for disrespecting me in my home." Elaine stared at the glowing screen, her jaw tightening. Her home? The audacity didn't even surprise her anymore. It just added weight to the choice she'd made 20 minutes earlier. She slipped the phone back into her purse, lifted her chin, and kept walking. The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft ding. Elaine stared at the text one last time. Without a second thought, she deleted it. She didn't respond, not because she was afraid, because Megan wanted a reaction, and Megan didn't deserve her energy, her breath, or another syllable. Respect wasn't a right that came with marriage. It was earned, and Megan hadn't earned a drop. The next morning, the sky hung low over Denver, gray and slow, like a held breath. Carolyn pulled into the driveway, with a growl of her aging Subaru, and leaned on the horn once, just enough to rattle the stillness. Elaine stepped outside, wrapped in her charcoal peacoat, walking a little steadier than the day before. She didn't look back at the house. "I hope you're ready to fall in love," Carolyn said, sunglasses perched too high on her head, grinning. "With a piece of wood?" Elaine asked, easing into the passenger seat. Carolyn raised a brow. "Honey, this place doesn't sell wood. It sells power." They drove in silence for a few miles, the hum of tires on asphalt the only sound. Carolyn's gloved hands rested confidently on the wheel. Every so often, she glanced sideways, but said nothing. Finally, she pulled into a quiet street lined with boutique storefronts, and parked outside a narrow shop with deep blue trim. A brass sign above the door read, Torres Canes and Walking Works. Carolyn helped Elaine out of the car, then opened the door with a theatrical flourish. After you. Inside, the shop smelled of sandalwood, varnish, and something faintly floral. It was quiet, no background music, no chatter, just the soft tick of a wall clock, and the warm hush of polished wood. Canes of every shape and design lined the walls like art. Oak, mahogany, maple, curved, angular, some with inlays, some with engraving. Give me a moment. A voice called from the back. A woman appeared, wiping her hands on a cloth. She was tall, maybe in her 40s, with rolled-up sleeves, a confident walk, and deep-set, perceptive eyes. You must be Elaine, she said without preamble. Carolyn called ahead. Elaine tilted her head. I didn't realize I'd been pre-scouted. Rachel smiled. Carolyn made it very clear this wasn't just about a cane, it was about reclaiming something. I like her already. Elaine muttered. Rachel gestured to the right side of the shop. Come, let me show you something special. She led them to a wall where only 3 canes were displayed, each in a spotlight of warm overhead light. These are hand-carved, one of a kind, made by my father before he passed. I've kept them for people who need more than just support. Elaine's eyes landed on one in the center, deep walnut wood with a silver handle shaped like a winding branch. Etched along the shaft were faint, swirling patterns, subtle, elegant, powerful. She reached for it. The second her hand wrapped around the handle, something clicked inside her. The weight was perfect, not too heavy, not too light. A quiet strength, humming against her palm. Carolyn stepped back, arms crossed, watching with a knowing smile. This one, Elaine said, voice low. Rachel nodded once. It's yours. They rang it up, and when Elaine tried to pull out her card, Carolyn waved it away. My treat. And no arguing. I've got 3 decades of friendship on you. They left the shop and walked next door to a quiet cafe that smelled of cinnamon and dark roast. Carolyn ordered 2 cappuccinos and a slice of lemon cake to share. They sat by the window, steam rising from their mugs, the new cane resting proudly against Elaine's chair. To dignity, Palm, Carolyn said, raising her cup. Elaine raised hers in return, and to not letting parasites set the rules. They laughed, loud and real. For the first time in days, Elaine didn't feel like a trespasser in her own life. She felt present, whole. Carolyn leaned forward, smirking. You're not done, you know. Elaine smiled back. No, not even close. Her phone buzzed. A call from Martin, she answered. Yes? His voice was calm, composed. We can finalize your will next week. Elaine's smile didn't fade, but her eyes? They sharpened. Her grip tightened on the cane. Good, she said. Let's finish what she started. Elaine sat in Martin's office, spine straight, her new cane resting beside her like a sentinel. The Denver skyline blinked through the window behind him, clouds dragging across the glass like ghosts. On the polished desk in front of her sat the final version of the will, crisp, clear, and damning. Martin adjusted his cufflinks. Last chance to change your mind. Elaine met his eyes, voice steady. They made this choice for me the moment she broke my cane. He nodded. Then let's proceed. He turned the pages slowly, each one a chapter of justice. The language was precise: property, investments, life insurance, even the antique jewelry. Every asset that Megan had likely daydreamed about while sipping wine on the porch now had a new destination. To Carolyn Hayes for her years of loyalty and friendship, to the Rosemont Senior Program, to fund weekly classes and social events. Nothing, not a dime, to David or Megan Foster. Elaine reached for the pen. Her fingers curled around it the way they'd once curled around her cane tightly, reverently, with full understanding of its weight. She signed. One page, then another. The third. With each signature, a different kind of silence filled the room. Not mournful, not hesitant, triumphant. Martin notarized the final page with the precision of a man who'd done this for decades and rarely enjoyed it this much. His stamp landed on the paper with a quiet thunk as definitive as a gavel. Elaine sat back and let out a long breath. It didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like balance, finally restored. Any regrets? Martin asked. Elaine shook her head. Regret implies I did something wrong. He smiled faintly. You didn't. In fact, I'd argue this might be one of the cleanest, most purposeful rewrites I've ever executed. Elaine laughed softly. That's the best review I've had in years. Just then, the door opened and Carolyn stepped in, carrying a pastry box and a thermos of coffee like she was crashing a board meeting. I brought the essentials, she said, flaky and strong like both of us. Elaine chuckled, rising to greet her. They hugged, not gently, fiercely. I didn't want to miss the moment you signed her future away, Carolyn whispered into her ear. It's done, Elaine whispered back. They pulled apart, and Carolyn scanned Martin's desk like a general surveying the battlefield. I hope you put in something petty, she said. A postscript, no gifts for the woman who shattered hardwood with spite, something like that. Martin cleared his throat. Actually, I do have an idea. Elaine raised an eyebrow. He leaned back in his chair. We've got the real will secured, notarized, filed, bulletproof. Right. But what if, he said slowly, we left a decoy version behind? Something, believable enough, close to the original. Just enough for Megan to find and gloat over. Carolyn straightened, intrigued. Go on. Martin steepled his fingers. We plant it in a place she's likely to snoop. The safe in your bedroom, for instance. Maybe we forgets to lock it. When she finds it, she'll think she's won. Elaine leaned forward, her lips curling into something between a smile and a snarl. You think she'll take the bait? Oh, she will, Carolyn said before Martin could answer. She won't be able to help herself. Martin nodded. And when the real will goes into effect, she'll be blindsided. No time to contest. No grounds to claim fraud. Just surprise. Elaine tapped the side of her cane gently, thoughtfully. I like it. Martin opened a drawer. Then let's write her a bedtime story. Elaine stood in front of the open safe, the old will trembling ever so slightly in her hand. Not from hesitation, from anticipation. The pages were worn at the edges, creased from time but not use. This version, once legitimate, was now obsolete. It still bore Tom's signature and her own, still listed David and Megan as the sole inheritors of the house, accounts, and everything in between. A fool's prize. And now, it had a new purpose. She folded it cleanly and placed it inside the safe, beneath an envelope marked insurance. Final docs. She left the safe door slightly ajar, just enough to whisper, "Look at me." Then she slid the closet door back into place and walked away without glancing back. Downstairs, the house hummed with the low whine of the dishwasher and the dull thud of Megan's heels on tile. Elaine moved quietly to the back porch where Carolyn sat waiting in the late afternoon sun, a glass of iced tea in one hand and a tabloid in the other. Well? Carolyn asked, squinting. It's done, Elaine replied, sinking into the creaky wooden chair beside her. Our trap is set. Carolyn chuckled, the sound bubbling up like a kettle on the edge of a boil. God, it's just like high school again. You remember when we left those fake love letters in Mrs. Kimmel's desk? She nearly called the police. Exactly. Carolyn took a long sip of tea, then added, but this is the deluxe version. Elaine didn't laugh. Not quite. But her eyes warmed. She had never imagined at 73 she'd feel this alert. Every word she spoke now mattered. Every move was calculated, not out of malice, but out of necessity. Across the yard, the wind rustled the aspen trees. Leaves chattered like conspirators. Inside the house, David had become more of a ghost than a son. He barely made eye contact, retreating behind long sighs and half-hearted nods. Once he would have come to her after dinner, asked if she needed anything, offered to fix the leaky faucet. Now he stood behind Megan like a shadow, muttering soft apologies after her sharp insults, but never stopping them. Elaine watched his back one night as he walked down the hallway after Megan snapped at her over a misplaced spice jar. He didn't turn around, didn't check on her. He was fading. And Megan? Megan had grown bolder, louder, more entitled. Elaine noticed how she lingered longer than necessary near Elaine's door, how she paused by the safe closet on laundry days. Once she even asked, offhandedly, "Do you still keep all the boring stuff locked up? Wills, house papers, that kind of thing?" Elaine had smiled sweetly. Of course, that's where they belong. Patience, she reminded herself every morning. Patience was armor. One Wednesday afternoon, while Carolyn was at the cafe and David was at work, Elaine came home from the senior center an hour early. The garage was silent, Megan's car still parked outside. Strange. She entered through the back and heard drawers. Upstairs. Elaine's pulse quickened. She stepped softly, her cane in one hand, rubber tip gliding silently over the carpet. She reached the bedroom hall and paused outside her door, the air thick with lavender-scented spray, something Megan overused when she thought she was being clever. The top dresser drawer scraped shut. Then another opened. Elaine pushed the door open slowly. Megan stood at the vanity, one hand rifling through jewelry boxes, the other frozen mid-air. Her head jerked up. "Oh," she said too quickly. I was just looking in my undergarments for a recipe." Elaine's tone was dry as sandpaper. Megan straightened. "You don't need to be so dramatic." Elaine stepped further into the room, resting the cane gently against the side of the dresser. "You're in my bedroom, going through my things." Megan crossed her arms. "You're being paranoid. I just needed to check the safe?" The silence in the room pressed against the windows. Megan didn't answer. Elaine walked to the closet door and opened it. The safe sat exactly as she left it, unlocked, bait intact. She turned to Megan, her voice calm but flint-edged. "Next time, knock." She closed the closet door, slowly, deliberately. Megan's hand was halfway into the drawer when Elaine stepped into the room. The sound of the cane tapping once against the hardwood echoed like a pistol crack in the quiet. Megan froze, guilty mid-movement, like a raccoon caught in kitchen light. Her mouth opened, then shut, then curled into a practiced smirk. "You scared me," she said, smoothing invisible wrinkles on her blouse. "You really shouldn't sneak up like that." Elaine didn't respond. She didn't need to. She simply stood in the doorway, her gaze steady, unreadable. Not cold, not cruel, just solid. Her cane rested lightly against her leg. Her grip relaxed. The silence filled the space between them like rising floodwater. Megan shifted her weight. "I was just checking to see if you—" Elaine's head tilted, not enough to interrupt, but enough to disarm. Megan's voice faltered. "I don't know why you're being so—" Elaine turned her back and walked away, slow and steady. No accusations, no fireworks, just one woman refusing to grant another an audience. The silence burned hotter than any words ever could. Behind her, Megan made a strangled sound, like frustration bottled up too long. "Fine," she snapped. "Be childish." Then the click of her heels, angry against the floor, marching down the hall and slamming the door to the master bedroom. Elaine waited until she was gone before exhaling. She made her way downstairs, the air in the house now strangely still. The silence didn't suffocate her. It settled in like armor. She dialed Carolyn. She was in the drawers again. Elaine said, "She's getting sloppy." Carolyn replied, "You're rattling her." I didn't say a word. "That'll drive her even crazier." A pause. "But start writing it all down. Everything. Time, date, what she touched. You're building a record, not revenge." Elaine nodded, already reaching for her leather-bound journal. "I'll start tonight." By 9 o'clock, the entry was written in clean cursive on ivory paper, October 4th, 4:26 p.m. Megan caught searching my room again. Left closet slightly open. She attempted to justify her actions, but offered no clear reason, no confrontation, no raised voices. Witness, none. The pen felt comfortable in her hand, more honest than any conversation she could have had with David. He knocked on her door just before 10. Not gently, not harshly, just indifferently. Elaine opened it, notebook still in hand. David didn't look at it. He looked past her, into the room, like he was searching for some kind of reason. "Can we talk?" he asked. "About?" He rubbed the back of his neck, like he used to do when he got caught lying as a teenager. "Why can't you just get along with her?" Elaine blinked, not in shock, in pity. "I've been quiet for a long time, David. I think you know that." He looked away. "She says you're cold, distant, that you make her feel unwelcome." Elaine's expression didn't shift. "Does that sound like me?" He didn't answer. "I didn't say a word to her today," she continued softly. "Maybe that's the problem. She expects my outrage. But I'm done performing." David turned, muttering something under his breath, and walked off without another word. Elaine closed her door, locking it this time. The next morning, she poured herself a cup of tea and checked her phone out of habit. Her breath caught. Megan had posted on her public Facebook page a quote image overlaid on a pastel background. "Some people need to be taught their place. If they won't learn, the lesson gets louder." Beneath it, Megan had added 3 little words. "Don't test me." No names, but the implication was sharp enough to bleed. Elaine didn't flinch. She screenshotted the post and added it to her folder. Elaine didn't even follow Megan online. She never had, but that morning, sitting at the community garden with her fingers in the dirt and the crisp scent of sagebrush in the air, her neighbor Greta walked over, phone in hand and brow furrowed. "You okay, Elaine?" she asked gently. Elaine looked up, wiping her hands on her gardening towel. "I'm fine." "Why?" Greta handed over her phone, her thumb hovering above a screen. "I think you should see this. Megan posted it last night. People are talking." Elaine squinted, then read the quote again. "Some people need to be taught their place. If they won't learn, the lesson gets louder." There was no name, no specifics, just venom. The caption? "Lines get drawn eventually." Elaine exhaled slowly through her nose. Not shock, not anger, just confirmation. She tagged herself at home when she posted it. Greta added, "People in the comments are guessing you two are fighting." Elaine handed the phone back, her hands steady. "Let them guess." That evening, after a hot shower and a stronger than usual cup of chamomile, she screenshotted the post from her own burner account and printed it out. She slipped it into her growing file. Incidents, unlawful behavior. Megan Foster. Each page was a map, a breadcrumb trail that led not to pity, but proof. Carolyn came over the next morning, wearing her too tired to be nice sweatshirt and carrying 2 egg sandwiches wrapped in foil. They sat on the patio under a wide navy umbrella, the city air unusually still for mid-September. "You saw the post?" Carolyn asked. "I did, and?" Elaine shrugged. "Added it to the file." Carolyn grinned. "You're getting scarily good at this." "I've had time to practice." Carolyn took a bite of sandwich, then wiped her mouth. "Just hold the line, Elle. You've already outplayed her. Don't let her bait you." "I won't," Elaine said simply. And she didn't. Instead of reacting, she began living. She started going to the senior center 3 times a week, sometimes 4. Not just for bridge and coffee, but to teach. She led a journaling workshop for widows, hosted a movie night with old Jimmy Stewart films, even helped organize a second-hand clothing drive that filled 3 pickup trucks. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. Every time she left the house with her new cane, Megan made a show of smirking from the kitchen. She'd call out things like, "Going to play bingo with the other leftovers," or "Don't stay out too long." "You're not exactly sturdy," Elaine never answered. Silence had become her sharpest weapon. David remained a ghost in motion. He'd shuffle in late from work, mumble a greeting, avoid her eyes, and disappear upstairs. Once he paused near the coffee machine and muttered, "You could try making it easier on her." Elaine didn't reply. But that night she baked a peach cobbler and gave the entire thing to the maintenance man's family down the street. Megan watched from the window as the kids shouted, "Thank you," on the sidewalk. She didn't say a word, but her glare left scorch marks. The next morning, Elaine sat at the breakfast table with a crossword puzzle and a thermos of hot lemon water. The sun spilled across the hardwood floor, casting long strips of light over her slippers. Her phone buzzed, from Martin Blake's subject, probate hearing. Scheduled. She opened the email. "Elaine, the court has confirmed your hearing. Probate date is set for October 19th, 10 a.m., downtown. Be ready. This is where we take everything back." Elaine reread the last line. "Not you, we." She closed her eyes for a beat and let the moment settle into her bones. Elaine adjusted the silver ring on her finger as the courthouse elevator climbed floor by floor. Her breath was steady, slow, but her grip on the cane told the truth, tight and unshaking. Today wasn't just a legal formality. It was the moment she reclaimed every piece of herself they tried to whittle away. The elevator dinged softly. She stepped out with Martin by her side, his briefcase in one hand, his calm presence anchoring her. "Are you ready?" he asked. Elaine didn't flinch. "I've been ready since the night she snapped that cane." They entered courtroom 4B. The scent of old wood, ink, and recycled air hit immediately. Polished benches gleamed beneath fluorescent lights. The American flag hung high behind the judge's bench like a silent observer of justice. Megan was already seated, center aisle, arms crossed, legs stretched too wide like she owned the place. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick loud, her expression smug. David sat beside her, hunched, not meeting anyone's eyes. Elaine and Martin took their seats directly across the aisle. The tension snapped like a rubber band between them. Megan leaned toward David and whispered something. Her laugh was breathy and sharp. Elaine didn't move. She didn't need to. A court clerk stood and called the case. Matter of probate. Foster estate. Petition to validate amended will, filed by Elaine Foster. The judge entered, mid-50s, efficient, no nonsense, and took her seat. "Let's proceed." Martin rose smoothly, unfolding the papers with the calm of a surgeon preparing instruments. "Your Honor, we are presenting an updated, fully notarized last will and testament, executed by Mrs. Elaine Foster. It reflects current intent and removes former beneficiaries, Megan Foster and David Foster, her son and daughter-in-law, from all claims to the estate." Megan's mouth opened, a slight twitch of disbelief flashing through her expression. David blinked hard, looking at the floor like he'd just remembered something unpleasant. Martin handed over the documents. "These revisions were signed in my office, witnessed and notarized per Colorado statute. I submit the certification, plus a written log of events leading to this change, including supporting documentation regarding coercive and disrespectful behavior toward Mrs. Foster." The judge flipped through the pages slowly, her face unreadable. Megan finally stood, her voice sharp. "Your Honor, I wasn't notified of these changes. You were not the executor, nor the attorney," the judge interrupted coolly. "And you were not entitled to advance notice of a will you no longer appear in. Sit down." Megan hesitated, visibly stunned, then dropped into her chair, her jaw tight with restrained fury. Elaine didn't look at her. Martin returned to his seat as the judge finished reading. The courtroom went still. "I find the documentation sufficient," the judge said. "The revised will is legally valid and shall be recognized as the operative testamentary document. The estate will be processed accordingly." Just like that, Elaine exhaled, softly but deeply, as if a weight tethered to her ribs had finally lifted. Across the room, Megan's mouth hung open. Her gaze darted to David, who still hadn't spoken. When she finally whispered, "She can't do this," he didn't respond. Elaine stood with Martin and faced the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor." The gavel fell. Bang. Case closed. As they exited the courtroom into the hallway's buzz of heels and echoing voices, Martin leaned in slightly, his voice low but charged. "She won't just be angry." he murmured. She'll get desperate now. Elaine met his gaze, unblinking. Let her. They reached the top of the courthouse steps, where the sky had broken into a brilliant burning blue. The breeze lifted her coat hem as if even the wind had been waiting for this outcome. Martin paused beside her. There's one more step if you want it. Elaine looked at him. The house. You're still the legal owner. With this validation in place, you can serve an eviction notice to both of them. We'd have full grounds. Her breath caught, just for a second. Freedom wasn't theoretical anymore. It had a front door. Elaine didn't tremble when she signed the eviction authorization. Martin slid the paperwork across the polished table, its legal language crisp and surgical. She read every line, each clause a thread in a noose she didn't feel guilty tightening. Martin looked up from his copy. Once this is filed, we start the clock. They'll have 30 days. Elaine met his eyes without hesitation. File it. The pen didn't hesitate in her hand. Not anymore. When they left the building, Carolyn was waiting at the curb, engine running, sunglasses on, music low. Well, she asked, even though she already knew. Elaine opened the door and climbed in with slow satisfaction. The countdown begins. Carolyn laughed like a woman 20 years younger. Oh, I do hope I'm home when she opens that envelope. The drive home was short, but the silence between them was rich. The kind of silence that followed victory, not gloating, just grounded. Elaine stared out the window as the streets of Denver passed, dog walkers, school kids, early leaves starting to curl with the coming cold. Life moved on out there. But inside the house she owned, time had been frozen by fear and entitlement. Not anymore. 3 days later the letter came by certified mail. Elaine heard the mailbox creak open through the living room window, the postal truck rumbling away seconds later. She didn't rush to retrieve it. She sipped her tea first, folded her blanket, set the needlepoint aside. Then she walked calmly to the box, pulled out the thick white envelope with the court seal in the top corner, and placed it neatly in the center of the kitchen table. When Megan walked in later, phone in hand, flipping through Instagram stories, she didn't notice it at first. Not until Elaine pushed it an inch toward her without a word. What's this? Megan asked, brow knitting. Your notice, Elaine replied. Megan tore it open with one hand, lips already curling before she finished the first paragraph. You've got to be kidding me, she hissed. Elaine remained seated, calm, her tea steamed beside her. The sky outside had turned a chalky gray, like it was holding its breath. Megan's voice grew sharper. You're evicting us? From this house? Elaine didn't answer. She simply took a slow sip of tea. You're out of your mind, Megan snapped. David, she bellowed. David. Footsteps echoed from upstairs, and moments later, David stood in the doorway, hair disheveled, eyes wide. She's kicking us out, Megan shouted, thrusting the paper at him like a knife. David read it, his face drained of color. Mom, he said softly, almost like a child. Why are you doing this? Elaine set her teacup down with precision. Because I'm reclaiming what's mine. She's your daughter-in-law, he said, as if that alone deserved mercy. Elaine stood, her cane firm beneath her hand. And you're my son. But you let her humiliate me, repeatedly, publicly. You watched her break the cane your father gave me, and you said nothing. David looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't form the words. You've both made this house feel like a stranger's walls. I want my home back, David. I'm done asking. Megan stormed off, the paper crumpled in her fist. The slam of the bedroom door shook a picture frame loose on the wall. Elaine didn't flinch. David lingered a second longer, then followed, shoulders slumped, shoes dragging across the floor like guilt made visible. Elaine sat down again and picked up her tea. Still warm, still hers. The next morning the sheriff's office called. A woman with a clipped voice confirmed the address, then stated matter-of-factly, we've scheduled an initial property inspection next week. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Elaine wrote it down in her planner with steady hands. Thank you, she said. The sheriff's cruiser rolled up the driveway at exactly 10 o'clock a.m. No sirens, no drama, just the slow, unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel that turned the whole neighborhood quiet. Elaine stood at the front door waiting, her cane in one hand, the official court documents in the other. Her white blouse was pressed, her slacks neat, no jewelry today, just the silver wedding band she refused to take off. Tom would have liked that. Through the window, she could already see Megan pacing in the living room like a caged thing. David sat at the edge of the recliner, elbows on his knees, jaw clenched. The doorbell rang. Elaine opened it. "Mrs. Foster?" the female sheriff asked, stepping onto the porch, clipboard in hand, badge gleaming in the morning light. "Yes," Elaine said calmly. "I'm Deputy Carla Reyes, here for the scheduled property inspection regarding the eviction proceedings. May I come in?" Elaine stepped aside, letting her in without a word. The moment Deputy Reyes entered, Megan shot up from the couch like she'd been launched. "This is harassment," she barked. "You can't just barge into our home." Reyes didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I have legal authority granted by Denver County to inspect the premises. This isn't optional." David stayed seated, eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. He didn't say a word. Elaine handed Reyes the file neatly organized, tabbed and labeled. "You'll find the notarized will on top, the court order below. Supporting photos and notes are at the back." Reyes flipped through the documents with practiced efficiency, nodding occasionally. "This is in order. Thank you." "You're just believing her," Megan snapped, stepping forward. "She's old. She's not even mentally stable. Do you know how many pills she takes a day?" Elaine didn't react, but the room chilled. Reyes turned to Megan. "Ma'am, unless you can produce a counterclaim or a legal document invalidating this order, I suggest you lower your voice." Megan's nostrils flared. "This house is ours. We've lived here for years. She can't just erase that." Elaine's voice, when it finally came, was soft. "You were guests. You became squatters the moment you thought entitlement replaced gratitude." David finally looked up. His eyes bloodshot, mouth parted like he was just beginning to understand the finality of this moment. "Mom," he said, "do you really want it to end like this?" Elaine turned toward him slowly. "No, I wanted it to never begin like this." Outside, a few neighbors had gathered. Mrs. Keller from next door, the Harris couple from across the street. Even young Lucy Pearson, still in her college sweatshirt, was filming quietly from her porch. Megan stormed toward the window and yanked the curtain shut. "This is disgusting. You're humiliating us." Elaine turned to Deputy Reyes. "Would you like to begin your inspection?" Reyes nodded and began walking through the house, marking notes on her clipboard. She checked the condition of each room, noting belongings, structural wear, and general occupancy. She paused in the kitchen, where Megan had clearly tried to make things look orderly. Too much lemon-scented cleaner, the kind of overcompensation guilt leaves behind. When Reyes returned to the living room, she tucked her pen behind her ear. "Inspection completed. The order stands. You'll have 7 days to vacate the property. If you refuse, we'll proceed with physical removal." Megan let out a short, bitter laugh. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she hissed at Elaine. "Sitting on your throne like you're better than us." Elaine looked at her for a long moment, then replied, "No, I just finally stopped letting you pretend you were better than me." The sheriff stepped out to the porch, nodding toward Elaine. "You'll get the final paperwork in the mail, but it's official." Neighbors turned back to their homes, murmuring amongst themselves. A few glanced at Elaine, nodding in quiet approval. Inside, Megan stood frozen, fists clenched, eyes wide with fury. As Elaine turned to leave the room, Megan whispered just loud enough to reach her. "You'll regret this." Elaine didn't turn around. Elaine knelt slowly by the front door, the air still carrying the scent of pine cleaner and brewing storm. Her hands were steady as she polished the silver handle of her cane, the one Rachel had sold her weeks ago, the one that had never buckled, never broken. She placed it in its place by the entryway, just beneath the hanging hooks, upright, waiting, ready. Behind her the house creaked. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed hard enough to rattle a photo on the wall. Megan's tantrums had become as regular as the morning news, loud, bitter, and repetitive. Elaine didn't flinch. In the kitchen, Carolyn sat at the table sipping her coffee from a mug that read "Don't poke the queen." She grinned over the rim, still feeling guilty about any of this. Elaine stood and walked over, her steps as slow and deliberate as the pages of her journal. "I regret not doing it sooner," Carolyn hooted. "Now that's the Elaine I remember. The one who talked the HOA president into resigning after they cited your garden for being too expressive." Elaine chuckled and sat. "That man still parks crooked just to annoy me." "Well, it's official," Carolyn said, setting her cup down. "You're the quiet storm, hurricane in pearls." They toasted with coffee like it was champagne. Later that afternoon, Martin called. His voice was calm, deliberate, always a few steps ahead. "I reviewed the sheriff's report," he said. "Everything's tight. They found no issues with your documentation, and as of now, the eviction stands unchallenged." Elaine nodded into the phone. "And if they try anything?" Martin paused. "Then they'll meet the weight of the full court system, and me. But I don't think they will. Not legally. Emotionally? That's another story." She looked out the window. Megan was in the yard, pacing, shouting into her phone. Her voice cut through the screen like a buzzsaw. David stood on the porch steps, his shoulders slouched, arms crossed, not engaging, not intervening. Cowardice had a shape, and it looked like that. "He's avoiding me," Elaine said softly. Martin sighed. He always did avoid conflict. That's why she was able to control him so easily. "I raised him better." "You did. And that's what she hated." Elaine thanked him and hung up. As the sun lowered and the light spilled long across the living room rug, Elaine sat in her armchair and pulled out her journal. Each entry was neat, dated, and thorough. Not obsessive, just undeniable. October 11th, 4:47 p.m. Megan slammed her door for the third time. No provocation. David didn't intervene. October 12th, 7:12 a.m. Heard Megan muttering outside my room. Something about getting even. She didn't knock. I stayed silent. October 13th, 10:05 p.m. They've packed nothing. She flipped back through earlier pages, tracing the slow march to this moment. Not revenge. Not malice. Just documentation. A record of who had chosen chaos and who had chosen stillness. By nightfall the house had quieted. Somewhat. David passed her in the hallway without looking up. Megan's perfume lingered in the stairwell, thick and artificial. Elaine opened a window to let it out. She spent the evening in her bedroom reading a novel she didn't particularly enjoy, drinking peppermint tea she didn't particularly need, because both acts reminded her of control, of choice, of calm. Outside, the wind began to pick up. The branches of the old elms scraped softly against the siding, the kind of sound that used to keep her up at night. Now, it was background noise. She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, not from restlessness, but readiness. The house had chosen her back. The sheriff's knock came like thunder dressed in ceremony. 3 hard raps on the front door at exactly 12 p.m. No hesitation, no apology. The moment had arrived. Elaine stood in the entryway, her cane upright in her right hand, the will tucked into a manila folder beneath her left arm. She didn't look toward the staircase where Megan had been pacing for the last hour like a cornered animal. She didn't bother asking David if he was ready. She simply opened the door. Deputy Reyes stood tall in her uniform, clipboard in hand, 2 uniformed movers behind her. "Mrs. Foster," she said with a firm nod. "We're here to enforce the eviction order." Elaine stepped aside. "The house is ready." Megan's scream rang out before they even crossed the threshold. "You can't do this. I live here. You have no right." The movers didn't flinch. Neither did Reyes. "We're operating under court orders, ma'am," the deputy said, voice flat. "You've had over 30 days. Today is the legal deadline. Please stand aside. I'll sue you." Megan shrieked, blocking the hallway. "All of you, you don't know who I." David, standing near the fireplace, looked as if his skeleton had given up trying to hold him upright. His face sagged, eyes dull, arms limp at his sides. "Megan," he said, voice barely audible. "It's done." She spun to him like a tornado. "You're just going to let her take it. Let her win. But there was no fight left in David. Not for her. Not for anything. I don't live here anymore, he said simply. Elaine remained silent. Her calm, polished silence filled the room more powerfully than any shouted word. The movers began hauling boxes, pre-packed by court order. Megan hadn't packed a single one herself, leaving it to David and the sheriff's team. She watched them carry her life out in silent chunks. Wardrobe first, then shoes, then the vanity she used more than the kitchen. Outside, neighbors peeked from behind blinds and porch screens. Carolyn stood by the hedges in her leopard scarf, arms folded, eyes locked on the front door, like a sentry waiting for a signal. Elaine stepped onto the porch as the final box was carried out. David exited quietly behind her, carrying one last duffel bag. He paused halfway down the steps, turned, and looked at his mother. I never meant for it to get like this. Elaine didn't blink, but you let it. He looked down, nodded, and walked away. Megan was the last to leave, not out of patience, but out of pride. The movers waited by the truck, avoiding eye contact. She stepped out with clenched fists, eyes wild. Her once flawless blouse was wrinkled now, her lipstick smeared, hair frizzed with fury. You think this makes you powerful? She spat. It makes you pathetic. You're going to rot in this place, alone. Elaine stared at her. Her voice came slow and clear. You already did rot here, Megan. I just finally took out the trash. Megan's face twisted like she'd been slapped. Without another word, she marched to the car, slammed the door, and peeled out of the driveway like the tires could undo time. Elaine exhaled. The wind shifted. Warmer. Lighter. The porch creaked not with tension but possibility. Carolyn walked up the steps and took her hand, squeezing gently. You okay? She asked. Elaine nodded. I've never been more okay. The movers disappeared down the block. Deputy Reyes handed her a final slip of confirmation, then nodded, and left without fanfare. Elaine stood alone for a moment. No one else in the house. No threats. No screams. Just the hum of her refrigerator, and the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She stepped back inside, closing the door softly behind her. Then she walked through every room, pausing in the kitchen, where she could finally hear herself think, and in the living room, where sunlight cut across the floor without being dulled by arguments. She ended in the study, pulled out a fresh envelope, sat at the desk, and began to write. 2 hours later, Martin met her at his office. Elaine handed him the new draft of her will, written in her careful cursive, now typed and notarized under his hand. I want the house left to the Rosemont Senior Program, she said. Turn it into a resource center, classes, meals, support. Martin smiled slowly. Your son and daughter-in-law won't see that coming. Elaine's expression didn't change. I'm not punishing them. I'm planting something where they tried to poison. Elaine's signature slid across the page in one fluid motion, slow, deliberate, final. The pen clicked shut with a satisfying snap. Martin lifted the will with a gloved reverence, checking the signatures, the notary seal, and the timestamp. The moment settled between them, quiet and sacred, like a church pew after the last hymn. It's done, he said gently. Elaine leaned back in the leather chair, her eyes fixed on the signed document, not with hesitation but clarity. It's not revenge, she murmured, as if reminding herself. It's a reset. Martin nodded. And one that'll outlive them both. The final will left nothing to David, nothing to Megan. The house would go to the Rosemont Senior Program, to be converted into a community hub for Denver's elderly. Free meals, legal aid, mental health support, art classes, grief counseling. Her money would ensure it ran for decades. The remainder of her estate would be split between a local housing assistance fund and, per Elaine's request, a damn good bookstore that still sells real hardcovers. Carolyn, true to form, was listed second only to the nonprofit, a stipend and the right to remain in Elaine's home, should she ever need it. They tried to treat this house like a lottery ticket. Elaine said, her voice stronger now. Let them choke on the numbers. Martin chuckled under his breath. You've written one of the most poetic legal endings I've ever processed. Elaine raised an eyebrow. Just wait until you see my obituary draft. He offered the final page for one last glance. She didn't need it. Mail me the certified copy, she said. I want it in my hands, tucked in the safe. Of course, he stood and extended his hand. Elaine shook it. No nerves, no second guessing. When she stepped outside, the Denver sky had shifted from bright blue to overcast, a light breeze sweeping leaves down the sidewalk like little messengers announcing change. Carolyn waited at the curb, leaning against the passenger side door, sunglasses crooked and a grin already waiting. Well, she asked as Elaine approached. I signed away every inch they thought they could touch, Elaine said, her cane tapping against the concrete with unspoken punctuation. Carolyn's smile turned fierce. Tell me you feel free. Elaine opened the car door, paused, and looked at the horizon. Lighter than I've felt in 20 years. They drove to a quiet cafe, tucked between an art gallery and a consignment shop, the kind of place with pressed tin ceilings, creaky wooden floors, and black tea served in real porcelain. Carolyn ordered them both a lemon chamomile with honey and a slice of walnut cake to share. Elaine stirred her cup slowly, watching the steam rise, her fingers once tense from weeks of quiet war, now curled gently around the warmth. I kept imagining it would feel hollow, she admitted. Cutting them out, letting go of David. And does it? Carolyn asked gently. No, she said. It feels clean. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the clink of ceramic and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine filling the space. A soft jazz cover of Sinatra played through the speakers. Someone's perfume drifted past their table, violets and bergamot. Elaine pulled a folded note card from her purse and slid it across the table to Carolyn. It was labeled in ink, "In case I go first." Carolyn opened it, scanned the short paragraph, and smiled. You want me to help run the house if it turns into the senior center. You're the only one who knows how to throw a decent bingo night and scare off financial predators in one phone call, Elaine said. Carolyn raised her tea in a mock toast. I'll haunt it properly if they try anything funny. Elaine raised hers in return. Deal. By the time they finished their cake, the clouds had begun to clear. Sunlight streamed through the window in golden slats. Elaine checked her phone. A quiet screen. No messages. No threats. No pleading apologies from David. She no longer waited for them. She no longer wanted them. Back home, she walked room to room, not out of routine, but reverence. She placed her cane by the door, fluffed the throw pillow on her reading chair, ran her fingers along the edge of the window frame in the study, the spot Tom used to lean on while drinking his evening coffee. Grief didn't go away, she realized, but it got lighter when it stopped sharing space with poison. Just as she was settling down to journal, the mailbox creaked open outside. She stepped onto the porch and saw the small manila envelope resting in the box, the corner stamped with Martin's law office seal. Elaine turned the dial of the safe with precise, practiced fingers, left, right, left, until the final click settled into place like a seal being pressed in wax. She opened the heavy door, revealing a small, orderly world inside. The newly certified will sat in a protective sleeve, the notary stamp still fresh, the signature line a quiet rebellion inked in black. She slipped it in between her late husband's military discharge papers and their original deed from 1978. A legacy rewritten, not with rage but resolve. She closed the safe, turned the dial, listened to it lock. Then she straightened, rolled her shoulders once, and exhaled slowly. The air in her bedroom no longer felt stale. It smelled of sandalwood and lemon polish. The morning sun cut in across the floor, turning the hardwood into warm amber streaks. She walked out slowly, her cane tapping a gentle rhythm, not out of necessity, but presence. Each room she passed held pieces of her, unburdened now. The den smelled faintly of cedar, from the candles she always lit while reading. The kitchen was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. No more slammed drawers or shouted demands. The dining room table had been cleared of clutter, her favorite blue runner laid out just the way Tom used to like it for Sunday dinner. At the fireplace, she paused. The cane, Rachel's hand-carved masterpiece, was in her grip like an extension of herself. Steady, beautiful, stubborn. Elaine reached for the hearth and leaned the cane gently against the brick. A symbol now, not a crutch. The silence in the house wasn't empty, it was whole. At 4 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. 2 quick chimes. No surprise. Carolyn always rang like she was announcing herself to a party she already owned. Elaine opened the door to find her best friend holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil and grinning like she'd just won bingo and the lottery in the same day. "I bring offerings," Carolyn said, lifting the dish. "What is it?" Elaine asked, stepping aside to let her in. "Chicken tetrazzini, with extra parmesan, enough to clog an artery and silence complaints." "Bless you," Elaine said with a small smile. They moved through the kitchen like a practiced duet, Elaine setting the table, Carolyn pouring the wine. As the casserole warmed in the oven, they stood side by side, looking out the kitchen window, where a neighbor's dog chased leaves down the sidewalk. "No noise," Carolyn said, lifting her glass. "No slammed doors, no threats, just quiet." Elaine tapped her glass against hers. Exactly how it should be. They sat down to eat, and the food was warm, cheesy, a little too salty, but perfect. Laughter came easy, Carolyn recounting an incident at the senior center involving a bingo caller who mixed up numbers and accidentally called a blackout. 73-year-olds almost rioted, Carolyn said through a mouthful of noodles. There was a flying purse. "I'm not kidding." Elaine laughed so hard she had to set her fork down. For the first time in what felt like years, she didn't feel the weight of surviving. She felt the joy of owning her hours, of choosing peace, of knowing her silence had not been surrender, but a strategy. After dinner, they washed dishes together, Carolyn drying, Elaine rinsing, as soft dusk settled through the windows, the house glowing gold, as the sun sank behind the rooftops. Elaine moved to the living room, eased herself into her favorite chair near the fireplace, and folded a blanket across her lap. She glanced over at the cane resting beside the brick hearth, and smiled. Not broken, not replaced, reclaimed. Carolyn joined her with 2 cups of mint tea. They sat together in the quiet, no need to fill it. The kind of silence earned after long storms. Elaine took a sip and looked around the room. Her home again, not inherited, not stolen, not shared, hers. She reached for the journal on the side table, flipping to a fresh page, the pen sliding into her hand, as if it had waited for this moment. She didn't write a list, or a complaint, or a log. She simply wrote, "Some breaks heal, and some break legacies forever."